Hi, friends. This is your pal Scott Garibay, and today I want to talk about American politics, and I want to talk about the difference between intended consequences and and actual consequences, and how our political environment today is so dramatically volatile and so dynamic and so dramatic that those two things often don't like often do not even remotely link together. So let's talk about it. Okay, so Jimmy Kimmel recently. So there was a huge event that like just captured the airwaves about coming up on 2 weeks now ago, and Jimmy Kimmel jumped in and he was very vocal about it, right? And the right was like, oh, the right was grinding their teeth after they heard what he said, and they were like just irate, right? Like really, really upset with Jimmy Kimmel. And so different elements within the right um, pulled some levers, and the intended consequence was that he would be silenced, right? And that Jimmy Kimmel was gonna, they're gonna take this really significant action, or series of actions, and then that's it. Jimmy Kimmel is out of the picture, and Jimmy Kimmel suffers for what he says. That was the intended action, right? So he was silenced. He was taken off the air for maybe 4 or 5 days. I think he might have missed 4 or 5 days of his show. But the moment he went off the air, first of all, like before he went off the air, Jimmy Kimmel was an also ran, right? Like he was in the mix. He was a late night host. Kind of like, who cares? Like there's a ton, right? Like it's Jimmy Fallon, it's Stephen Colbert, it's Conan O'Brien, um, and I think that's it. I think that's like the big, and then there was Jimmy Kimmel, and he was just in that pack. Like it was, he was not. I don't think he was. Generally, I think the winner out of all of those is generally Jimmy Fallon. He has a lot of goodwill. People love him, and he's been doing his thing for years and years and years. And he has stuff that goes viral. That goes viral just because it's delightful or innovative, and his stuff has a little bit of range, right? And really, Jimmy Kimmel, was not at the top of that pack, but the moment that he was silenced, right, and taken off the air, he immediately went to the top of that pack. And I think you heard more about Jimmy Kimmel in those 5 days than you had heard about every other late night host in the last year and a half, right? And Jimmy Kimmel, his name was there was a 10x multiplier put in front of it, right? What's also really interesting is he wasn't silenced for long. He was off for 4 or 5 days, and then Disney came right back in and said, "Okay, we're putting him right back on the air," and that's what happened. Now there were a few like components within his normal, um, you know, free the people who broadcast him within his broadcast suppliers who said, we're still going to keep you out, but he came back on quite a few of his channels, and you could see him, right? And frankly, he did his monologue at like midnight the night before, and the next day everyone could watch it on YouTube, right? So it didn't even matter if somebody had really cut these other groups out. You could still get the content, right? And what I thought was really interesting is the intended consequence was to make him suffer, to silence him, to make his numbers go down, right? It was a 10x multiplier on his name. It pushed him high, the intended consequence was to make him suffer. But it really looks like after it was all, after he came back on, he had been pushed to the top of the pack of late night hosts. And then when he came back, he had 6 million viewers, right? Which is much, much higher than his regular viewership, right? And at this point, his little he said, hey, my show isn't important. But at this point, what others are projecting onto this show is that it's extremely important, and there are going to be people, hundreds of thousands, if not low millions of people, who are going to watch that show as an act of civil production, right? Like of being involved in American politics, which is incredible. So I think one of the things that we should remember is if we're on the right or the left, the opposing team is going to take some actions, right? And they have intended consequences. And they're like, oh, we're going to make you suffer for this thing you did. But often, just because of the volatility of the American political environment, because of the drama that is baked into the American political environment, because of the dynamism that is baked into the American political environment, often the intended consequences do not even remotely match the actual outcome. And often the actions that one side takes, it turns out that the other side is massive, when it was meant for harm, it is massively productive for the other side, which is I really find fascinating. And I think it's important that we recognize, hey, this is a big freaking deal. Like, like intended consequences very, very, very often do not even remotely match um, actual consequences. Every single word you just heard in this video is my humble opinion. Nothing more, nothing less. The important part is when I get to hear your humble opinion. When you get in the comments and send your traffic. Please consider like subscribing and have a fetch millennium.